that will be held in the Bonneville County Courthouse, 605 North Capitol Avenue, Idaho, September 17th, 2020 at 2 p.m. by the Bonneville County Commissioners for the purpose of a public hearing in relation to the application of Stan and Kathy Gammon for appeal of Planning and Zoning Commission approval regarding Colter Yde. Okay. Appeal of the denial by the zoning administrator for a motocross track in the residential agriculture to RA2 zone. The general location is at the end of South Terra Vista Drive, south of West Broadway Street, and west of 55th West Idaho Falls, Bonneville County, Idaho. There was a legal description and instructions with the COVID restrictions and how to access this. I see we have some members of the public online. By way of introduction, the three commissioners are here, all present. Ruby Strong, our administrative assistant, and we have Michelle and Austin from Planning and Zoning participating by Zoom. We'll begin by having the applicant on the appeal present their case on why, I've got a few more instructions first, on why they think that the Planning Commission erred. And we've got plenty of testimony that we're going through that's already on the record. Without objection, we'll make this part of the record. I understand this is an emotional issue. From looking at that, we learned everything about good neighbors to letting dogs leave deposits on neighbors' property. So we don't need to repeat any of that. It'll be part of the record if you've already testified to that. The scope of today's hearing is to point out our ordinance and any applicable laws and why you think the decision was in error. That's what an appeal is for. So, any questions? Anything to add, Austin or Michelle?
Yes, I was prepared to say something about the case first, if you would still want that, or I can speak later.
Something about the case by way of what?
Did you not hear me? Can you hear me at all?
Yes.
All right. I was prepared to make a statement first, and then we would go from there, but.
Is it regarding the laws and the statutes?
Yes, or something similar to that.
Okay, first I think we'd like the applicant to present their case.
Okay,
then,
that's fine.
As you hear their points, you may want to adjust your comments and address those, letting us know what particular ordinances we need to be aware of. So,
all right.
The Gammons, you're welcome to sit here, but this picks it up pretty good. So,
this mask, I don't know. My name is Kathy Gammon, and I live at 451 South Carey Lane in Idaho Falls. Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me to speak with you today. The purpose of this appeal is to delineate wherein the Planning and Zoning Commissioners erred in their allowance of Mr. Yde's motocross track on non-permitted land. Non-permitted land use to develop and operate a motocross track in a designated RA2 zone. I would like to quote from section 1-511-4C of the Bonneville County Ordinances regarding the powers and duties of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Quote, the Planning and Zoning Commission may authorize the issuance of a permit for the use which is not specifically mentioned in the list of permitted uses, provided such a use is similar to and compatible with the uses permitted in the same zone and will be in harmony with the objectives and characteristics of that zone in which it is located. No use shall be considered as a similar use if it is contrary to the purposes or intent of this ordinance, or if it is inconsistent with the characteristics of the zone in which it is located. Section 1511(4)(e) states, quote, "The Planning and Zoning Commission may grant other special exceptions or other special use permits, but it shall not grant a use permit for any use in a zone if such a use is not listed therein as a permitted use, or is not similar to such permitted uses as determined by section 1511(4)(c), which I just quoted." So, in order for the Planning and Zoning Commission to authorize a non-permitted use within an RA2 zone, the land must be, number one, similar and compatible with the uses in RA2 zone. Number two, in harmony with the objectives and characteristics of the RA2 zone. And number three, no use shall be considered similar if it is inconsistent with the characteristics of the RA2 zone. Okay, so what is an RA2 zone designation? Firstly, RA is an acronym for residential agricultural, or as stated in Chapter 9, Section 1901, it describes it as a rural estates zone with the conversion of certain land areas into residential areas. Thus, by both its name and description, the primary purpose of an RA2 zone is residential land for the building of homes in which people reside and from which neighborhoods are formed. What are the characteristics of an RA2 land area? According again to section 1901, RA2 zone land encompasses land areas which are still rural in character, with large lot areas and open space to correspond to the rural character. What is rural character? It must be important because it was mentioned twice. Rural relates to farming and agriculture. Some synonyms for rural include rustic or open country living, or pastoral, where the beauty and serenity of country life. So accordingly, rural character should embody open agricultural type areas combined with the tranquility of country life. What are the objectives of an RA2 zone? Section 1901 again states, permitted uses and activities will be controlled to ensure a high standard for single-family residential use. The fundamental purpose of an RA2 ordinance is to control and ensure a high standard for families living in the RA2 zone. What does the statement permitted uses and activities will be controlled? Well, that's pretty straightforward. All activities and use, all permitted uses, or all uses and activities on RA2 land will be regulated and restricted according to the impact on the land and on the people living on that land. What does the second part, the more important part of that sentence, to ensure a high standard for single-family residential use? A standard is a model or an example for comparison. A high standard refers to an example of excellence. So a high standard for single-family residential use implies the highest or best model for residential use when land uses and activities are considered. According to the ordinance, RA2 land is to be utilized in an appropriate manner to result in a high standard for those living in that zone. What are the permitted uses of land in the RA2 zone? According to section 1902, 11 uses are permitted. Section 1417 states, uses of land which are not expressly permitted within a zone are expressly prohibited therein. A motocross track is not a land use permitted in the RA2 zone. This is not simply a matter of riding a motorbike through the sagebrush on your property. This is a dedicated and developed motocross track where all the sagebrush was cleared, and it was built with 54 imported dump truck loads of dirt and large earth-moving equipment. This is a track where, as Mr. Yde stated in his appeal hearing, 50 to 60 people enjoyed the experienced the joy of the track, with up to 6 motorbike riders at a time. This is motorbike riding on your property multiplied and exploded exponentially. So the question is, does the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision to allow non-permitted use on RA2 land align with their statutory duty to allow only land uses which are 1, similar and compatible to permitted uses, 2, in harmony with the objectives and characteristics of the zone, and 3, no use shall be considered similar if it is inconsistent with the zone characteristics. Let's look at each of these 3 statements separately. What is similar and compatible with permitted uses in RA2 land zone? The 11 permitted uses of RA2 zone include single-family dwellings, household pets, raising of livestock, barns, corrals, public areas such as churches, schools, parks, home offices, home daycare, and public utility buildings. A developed motocross track is not similar to any of these land uses and is incompatible with most of them. Mr. Alan Church pointed this out in his letter of July 27, 2020 to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Quote, 2-stroke or 4-stroke gasoline engines are both loud and unnerving to people and to farm animals that are being raised on adjoining properties. Mrs. Melanie Church states in her letter of September 15, 2020, quote, one of the attractions to this area for our family was the quiet rural environment and lots of space for our children to raise their 4-H livestock projects. Residential and agricultural activities are expected and encouraged in our area. The installation of a well-developed motocross track is not a compatible activity for surrounding residents.
Could I make a request?
Sure.
I'm going to slip out and let you continue to read this and make copies for the other 2. If you could summarize, because I see that you've got a number of pages and we have 2 other hearings going. This will be part of the record, so we'll have it word for word for us to study.
All right. So is the motocross track in harmony with the characteristics of the zone? No, it is not. The characteristics of an RA2 zone is rural, and a motocross track doesn't harmonize with rural character. And we have Mr. James Haldy and Mr. Jeff Lacey who also made statements. Is a motocross track in harmony with the objectives of the zone? The objectives, again, are to ensure a high standard for single-family residential use. Mrs. Melody Percorny states, and I hope that you will look at these, that a motocross track violates both the spirit and letter of the law. And Mr. Lacey, in a second letter, said, permitted uses of Section 109 are rural and agricultural and low impact as a group. A motocross track simply isn't appropriate in this setting. So a motocross track is not similar and compatible. It is not in harmony with the characteristics of RA2 and is not in harmony with the objectives of RA2 land. So according to this information, the Planning and Zoning Commission did not meet their statutory duty. They allowed land use for a motocross track, which is not similar and compatible, which is not in harmony with the objectives of the zone. Therefore, the Commission has erred in their decision to allow a motocross track in an RA2 zone. Additionally, Planning and Zoning Commission erred according to Chapter 5, Section 1511, Numbers 6 and 7. These are statutes that talk about the Planning and Zoning Commission responsibility when they permit actions. They cannot amend the ordinance. They cannot change the ordinance, the RA2 ordinance, when they make a decision. However, by allowing Mr. Yde's motocross track, they have allowed a new permitted land use in the RA2 zone. Instead of 11 uses now, there will be 12, including a motocross track. By this precedent, the Planning and Zoning Commissioners are modifying or amending the RA2 ordinance. They are rewriting the ordinance. So it would set a precedent for permitted use and would be perpetuated across the county in other RA2 zones. Let me just give you a quick example. If Mr. Yde is allowed a motocross track on RA2 land, we live on RA2 land, we could also put in a motocross track. Our neighbors to the south, the north, the west of us could put in motocross tracks. Pretty soon we'd have 30 motocross tracks or more in our residential neighborhood. This likely won't happen, but by allowing this precedent, the doors are opened for this to take place. And all rural character and the residential high standard that are demanded by the ordinance would be lost. And ultimately, it isn't just our neighborhood, it's all neighborhoods throughout Bonneville County.
It's just somebody signing up.
Oh, okay. What does Chapter 31B1 buffer zone say about motor track use? I'd like to read this one. This zone is established to provide a protective buffer around public or private land areas where, because of noise or for other reasons as may be determined by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, of uses within that zone be limited to minimize conflicts between competing land uses. So what are the land uses that compete that this ordinance needed to be created? It talks about a public motorcycle track and says, quote, "It may be desirable to create a buffer zone surrounding that track to prohibit further residential uses that would conflict with the use made of that track." This doesn't talk about an earthen berm. This ordinance states a buffer zone and describes uses within the zone to clearly separate two conflicting land uses. Years ago, the county commissioners recognized and realized that this was a problem, that a motorcycle track use and residential use were antagonistic to one another and inappropriate when placed next to each other. Consequently, they wrote an ordinance to provide a sufficient distance between two contrary land uses. That's why Noyes Park exists today. Two separate and distinct land uses that remain incompatible today. So the Planning and Zoning Commissioners erred in their allowance of Mr. Yde's appeal according to the following ordinances. And these I've spoken and they're listed on page 7. You may refer to those. And in conclusion, I would like to say, in his appeal statement, Mr. Yde suggested I submitted a complaint against his motocross track because I am afraid of change. I am not. Change is the one constant we experience in this life. However, I am afraid of and very firmly against change that takes place in an unplanned, uncharted, unjust manner based upon individual whim or desire. Isn't this the very purpose and reason for the existence of planning and zoning ordinances? To plan for and to formulate rules for the orderly use of land now and into the future in Bonneville County. With the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission to allow Mr. Yde's non-permitted land use for a developed motocross track in a rural residential neighborhood, all past planning and indeed the very ordinances themselves are negated. This is why the Planning and Zoning Administrator and one half of the Planning and Zoning Commission were against such a proposal. This is why 13 surrounding property owners or 24 individuals have signed a complaint, and 9 letters are in your file, have been submitted to the county commissioners against the allowance of a motocross track in our rural residential neighborhood. I ask you to thoughtfully consider the negative consequences to rural residential neighborhoods and the haphazard land use and changes that will occur if Mr. Yde's non-permitted land use for a motocross track is allowed to continue. This is why planning and zoning ordinances exist in Bonneville County, to accommodate change, but in a controlled way for the benefit of all residents. Stan will continue the presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And without objection, we'll make both of these summaries part of it.
Okay, because there's a lot in there I didn't say.
Yeah, that's why, we'll have time to review these. So, okay, your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Stan Gammon. I live at 451 South Carey Lane in Bonneville County, and there should be a picture number 1 that can be put on the screen that will show you the layout if everything works right. How much time do I have? Because I'll try to summarize what I want.
The hearing was scheduled for.
Okay, that picture that was just up there shows our property, the Yde's property, and where the motocross track is located. And I'll try to summarize some of the things that I want. I'll give this to you. Hopefully you'll read it.
Everybody's got a copy, and it's going to be part of the record. My name is Stan Gammon.
Yeah, okay, you do have that. Okay.
Your wife is very thorough.
Yes, she is. Okay, just about 5 things I want to cover here. And first of all, referring back to the ordinances, words mean things. And what it says, and I'll quote it, open space is it's talking about RA2 zoning areas, residential areas. And it says, quote, open space is to correspond to the rural character, and, quote, permitted uses and activities will be controlled to ensure a high standard. Now the question is, does a motocross track in a residential area fit that description? And briefly, what has happened in our neighborhood, Colter Yde has dedicated about 1.5 to 2 acres to build a motocross track. It's just not a trail that goes through the sagebrush. It is a track. Initially, show picture number 2, if you can. This was the picture taken back in June, taken from my property, seeing multiple loops 20 feet apart. There's about 6 or 7 of them. You see jumps that have been built. You see bank corners. This is a motocross track. It's just not a trail. And so in the July 29th meeting, the question came up. I heard it said 5 times by the Ydes, can I ride a motorcycle on my property? This truly is not a property rights issue in this particular case. The question they should have asked was, do I have the right to dedicate a large parcel of ground for the sole purpose of constructing, using numerous dump truck loads of dirt? He told us he brought in 54. We didn't count them, but he said 54 dump truck loads of dirt. He used earth moving equipment to build this motocross track and then to build a berm. That's the question he should have asked. Do I have the right to construct a dedicated motocross track on this scale in an RA2 residential zone? There's just no comparison with riding a motorcycle around your property for personal enjoyment. We all do. We all have motorcycles. We all ride motorcycles on our property. But when you go to this extent to dedicate a section of land in an RA2 zone and then bring in dump truck loads of dirt, front end loaders, use heavy equipment, it goes beyond, way beyond riding a motorcycle for personal enjoyment on a trail that follows natural topography on your private property. Another thing I want to address is noise. In the first meeting, Mr. Yde pretty much said, what's the big deal? We live in the county, we're surrounded by noise. Well, it's a red herring. We live in the county, but we live in a residential area in the county, and I can guarantee it's much quieter living in the county where we live than living on a city street. Sure, a hay baler is loud. It makes a lot of noise. There's only one field being farmed in our area, and it's to the east and south of where we live. When it comes time for tractor work, the farmer can be in and done in a day. It does not go on day after day, and it's not the constant revving up and revving down of a two-stroke engine. Picture number 3, we're talking about noise. If we can get picture number 3 up there. Mr. Yde recently has, with his imported dirt, built a berm. This picture, yeah, there's the berm that runs north and south. Let's look at another picture. It's picture number 3. That's number 5. So if Aaron, Austin, if you know another one, that one right there. Okay. That picture is taken from the southeast corner of my property. It looks up towards where Mr. Haldy lives, our neighbor to the south. It shows where the north-south berm comes in and intersects my property line at a 90-degree angle. I don't know why he built the berm. Maybe he built that as a sound barrier, but it's important to note as you look at this berm that you can see the sagebrush behind it. And then you see additional terrain above that. If the berm is below the sagebrush, how does it block any sound? What good is the berm? You know, maybe he thinks this is a barrier to stop the noise. It isn't. It's an illusion more than a reality. The fact is that this is a land use issue. Building a barrier or a berm is apart from what we're here to discuss today. The motocross track noise infringes upon ours and others' ability to enjoy our property and is a violation of the high standard and does not meet the established rural character that's called out in the RA2 ordinances. Let me just address another issue. Mr. Yde said in the July 29th meeting that he built this track to teach his 5-year-old son to ride a motorcycle. Sounds innocent, doesn't it? Very innocent. But what happens in 5 or 10 years? I have a grandson who's 14. I taught him to ride using a small displacement bike in my front and backyards, and I took him out to Noyes Park. Now, just a few years later, what does he talk about? He talks about how fast he can go, when he can get a bigger, faster, more powerful bike, and where he's going next to ride with his friends. When you ride a motorcycle, it's always more enjoyable to ride with your buddies. In this particular case, in this isolated area, riding with a group of people, and we've experienced that. Mr. Yde himself said that he's had at least 6 riders at one time, but when you ride, you like to ride with your friends because it's more enjoyable. So I just think this is going to amplify the noise and intrusion on the neighbors. There's also a couple of videos that have been sent in that hopefully you've had a chance to look at that will show. One video shows 3 riders, another shows 1 rider. If you listen to it, you can see that there's quite a bit of noise generated. The various riders amplify that noise. And this video was taken about 350 feet away from our backyard from where the riding was taking place. It was brought out that there's other motocross tracks in private property in Bonneville County, but they don't mention what the zoning classification is. And if there are other motocross tracks in Bonneville County, does this make it right on RA2 land? Is their existence in accordance with the zoning ordinances? But again, does it really matter? This is an issue about proper land use, not how many motocross tracks can be found in Bonneville County. Taking a tally of properties with or without a motocross track does not decide this issue. It's a question about what is permitted land use. The last thing I want to talk about, which I call a red herring, is change. And Kathy talked about this a little bit. We're not afraid of change. We have seen more change than anybody else in our neighborhood. Of the 10 families living on Carey Lane, only the Haldys predate us. There were only 3 homes on Carey Lane when we moved in. 7 homes have been built. There are 10 families with whom we share a warm relationship. We've known for 4 years that a house would be built on the Colter Yde property. During the explanations provided by the Ydes in the 2016 rezoning hearing to rezone the 11 acres from agricultural to RA2, there was no mention of any intent to construct a motocross track. We and our neighbors feel like information critical to the 2016 rezoning request was withheld. Our neighbor to the south, Mr. James Haldy, in his July 28, 2020 letter to the Bonneville County Planning and Zoning Commission wrote, he's referring back to that 2016 meeting. He wrote, quote, "The property on which the wide track is located was rezoned to RA2. The purpose of the rezoning was to permit the sale of the property to Mr. Colter Yde for the express purpose of building a single family dwelling with no mention of any plans for a motocross track. Needless to say, if the wide track had been part of the discussion, the outcome may well have been different." End of quote. So we know the neighborhood. We know the traditions. We know the spirit that are found there. What we don't like is change that is outside of the zoning ordinances, which will degrade the rural character of the neighborhood with a motocross track. So, rural character, as defined, those are the words that are found in RA2. How do you define that? I define it with the words like serene, peaceful, a place where families plant and raise gardens, where horses can be raised, where children are involved with raising animals for the county fair, where grandchildren come to visit, where we can enjoy a sunrise or a sunset in peace and quiet. But a motocross track constructed on this scale with earth-moving equipment using imported dump truckloads of dirt does not fit within the parameters of rural character. Why? Because of the noise, the dust, and the intrusion it makes in the lives of surrounding neighbors. One last thing, that picture right there. The property owners, the solid red box is where the motocross track. The neighbors against the motocross track are circled in red. They're on all sides of the property, of their property. Kathy and I are not alone in our opposition to the motocross track. We are joined by 22 surrounding property owners who signed the petition against the motocross track. That makes a total of 24 individuals against it. In addition to the petition, 9 personal letters were written by individuals in our neighborhood bordering all sides, not just on Prairie Lane, but on all sides of the property, stating they are against the motocross track because it is disruptive and does not conform to the high standard of an RA2 residential zone. So, my final question, does a motocross track on this scale and this complexity meet the high standard required in a residential neighborhood, required by the zoning ordinances? And does it fall within the rural character? Again, those words come out of RA2 zoning ordinances. I just emphasize that 24 surrounding neighbors agree that a motocross track is not a permitted land use and are opposed to the motocross track in our neighborhood. Thank you, commissioners, for your time.
Questions? We may have some questions
Sure.
after we hear.
Thank you.
Remind me the name again, White?
No, this is Dan.
No, I know, but I mean,
Yes.
the other name, I gotta pronounce it right. Is it White? Okay. Are the Whites here?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Testify?
Do you want us to go first? I was gonna let everybody else go and just step in at this spot.
No, you're the person who you're appealing against. We encourage you to keep your mask up because it's a Supreme Court
Yeah.
requirement. I don't want to get you for contempt of court.
You're fine. My name is Colter Yde. I live at 3866 Tradition Court. My property is of the reference in the topic of the conversation for today's meeting. I own 3 businesses. Sorry, I don't have enough time and have the pleasure of retirement yet to write a 30-page dissertation on what I believe and what I think should be happening. So I will be brief and get to the point. Commissioner Radford, do you have the pleasure of being able to see those 11 permitted uses of RA2 zone? Or any of the commissioners, are you able to look? You have. Being aware of it.
By the way, those are in the P&Z records. So
Okay, just making sure we have the reference. As we see reference in there, it talks about that public recreation is allowed. We all agree on that, correct? In that record, it does not say anything about private recreation. Private recreation to me is anything personal that you own on a single dwelling unit, whether it's RA2, RA1, RA5. Personal recreation is what you do to personally recreate. Nothing is listed as permitted uses in RA2 as personal recreation. That creates some serious gray area right there. When we walk down the road in any RA2 and we see a swimming pool, that's not a permitted use. When we see a pond, that's not a permitted use. When we see a zip line, that's not a permitted use. When we see a trampoline, not listed, not a permitted use. When we see a swing set, not a permitted use. I've easily counted 6 topics that we can easily identify throughout the whole community of things that are consistently used as private recreation that are not listed in the RA2 as permitted uses. When I reference my motorbike track, it's a motorbike track. It's for me, it's private recreation for me and my children. When we have family and friends over, they were going to be able to use it. It's private recreation. Yet we don't get to enjoy any private recreation in RA2, clearly is what it's stating. I understand you guys are here to uphold the law, but there is no law on private recreation. So what are we here to uphold? Commissioner Yde, in closing, I assume when you go home tonight, you'll drive down the Arco Highway and you'll turn down 35th to head north to your home. And in that drive, you will witness 2 motorbike tracks. I know that you've probably lived there at least longer or as the same as both of those residences. And I see that those motorbike tracks are still able to be upheld and used.
The only thing I encourage is not to make direct references to either of the commissioners and their knowledge or personal things. They're here as a trier of fact.
Yes, I understand. I'm just trying to make emphasis on there's gray area. The people that are deciding on this have already allowed their neighbors to have motorbike tracks in their neighborhood and have not yet complained because they still have their motorbike tracks. I'm not the only one in here that's doing this as far as in the county that's done this. It's clearly just become an issue because people are losing their view and they don't like that. I apologize that you guys have had to spend now 39 minutes on this topic, and I don't want to make it go any longer. But I do see that there is several gray areas within this, and I hope that you take that into consideration as you make your ruling and understanding, no matter what the decision is, there's far too much gray area in this. And I actually appreciate the gray area. I think the residents of Bonneville County enjoy having that because we don't want to overstep of government. That's not why we live in Idaho, or that's not why we live in the county of Bonneville County, because we don't want government officials overstepping our rights. And I think that you guys have allowed that. I think what we need to do, though, is allow people to designate what they see fit as private recreation, because in the regs, we're allowed to have public recreation, and that can be anything. There's no explanation of what the public recreation is. So if you can define recreation, that's allowed in RA2. I'm recreating. Thank you.
Okay, I do have a couple questions. Gammon's will have a chance to conclude.
Correct.
At the end of this, but you've made some statements that raise some questions. You know, say I think. Obviously, those are your interpretations. Do you think there's a difference between a track or a trail, like you referred to it, and a developed?
It's all the same. Is it getting used?
You don't. Well, let's go back to your example of a swimming pool or trampoline. Do you think that there's a difference in magnitude of say a trampoline versus, let's say, 54 dirt loads of truck? Talking about magnitude of recreation.
No, because only 4 loads were actually used to build the track. They were off on their account once again.
That was one of the next questions.
Yes. So they weren't accurate in it. We have done some landscaping with other dirt, has nothing to do with the motorbike track, and is not of the reference in this meeting.
Okay, so.
And it's not the same. They're all the same. I mean, I've had parties.
So the dirt you brought in, only 4 dump truck loads were used for the.
Correct. Correct.
Can you point out in one of those pictures where the rest of it was located?
Sorry, which, we can pull pictures up.
Austin, if you
Austin.
can pull up the,
I have a picture. I don't know if you have all the pictures from the last presentation. I brought them in case we didn't, but. And remind me again, as he's pulling this up, you were asking of reference of what again?
well, if you
Commissioner?
say, the four,
That's 4 loads of dirt
loads, where's the rest of it deposited? There's 50 some odd loads out there.
throughout my property.
Can you point out where?
It's not in here because we did landscaping in the recent time. So we built a privacy barrier for landscaping because we're going to build a windbreak. And so we're just trying to increase the height for our windbreak because obviously we can't plant trees on area that's not settled. So we're just using that as a place to plant our trees later on.
They don't grow well on that rock.
No, you've learned probably the same way I have. So that's strictly for our landscaping. Has nothing to do with the track. As you see there, actually though, we actually had to push the track down in certain areas to bring this dirt in. But as I made mention before, that dirt has nothing to do with this conversation because they're not in conjunction at all.
Thanks for the clarification.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. There was a couple of different references to how many people are using it.
Correct.
It was said once that 50 to 60 possibly using it. It was said 5 to 6, I think you said. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what scale of people is using this?
Well, if you look at the property again, just north of my property boundary is my parents' property boundary. And so on Sunday afternoons when we get together as a family, my nieces and nephews sometimes hop on their own dirt bikes that are stored at Grandma and Grandpa's house to ride over there as well. We have a total of 10 utility vehicles, you could say, as far as motorbikes and ATVs. 10 have never even been on there at one time on the track. I think at most we've had 6. Regularly though, there's maybe 1 or 2. As far as frequency of use, since the last meeting, we've rode on it 1 time just because we're so busy. We don't have time to always be out there and have our kids riding. So when we're talking about an enormous amount of noise, we mow our lawns at least once a week in the county. And when you do the decibel reading on a 50 cc 2-stroke engine versus a weed whacker, the weed whacker is actually louder. And that happens once a week.
Kind of a follow-up question to it then, if I can. I guess I'm still trying to understand scale. Commissioner Christensen alluded to it a little bit, but would you agree that there's different scales of track, and would one be more compatible in an RA2 zone than another, in your opinion?
I would go along the lines of saying not scale of track, but use and intent of track, meaning, am I gonna make this a commercial venture and make it a noise park? Because I know we've had that issue up on Ammon Hill, and this is nothing like that as far as making it a commercial venture. It's strictly a small scale private use track. And I think anything when it's private use or private recreation, it's all within the same scale. Actually, I don't think that would be the case.
Mr.
I can have the record and everything, but historically, it was referred to about a zoning change that you received in 2016.
Correct.
At that time, it was referred to as an intent to plan a single home on 11 acres.
Mm-hmm.
But those plans obviously changed.
No, that plan stayed the same.
They stayed.
Sorry, not to interrupt. I didn't know if you're progressing farther from that.
So the plan stayed the same, single home out there on 11 acres. But in addition to, you like to ride motorcycles.
Correct. So we actually in the last planning and zoning meeting submitted our preliminary plot plan because part of the changeover from going from ag to RA2, we were then required to submit a subdivision plat to progress forward with our property.
So historically, that's what brought up the issue. It wasn't the neighbors saying, hey, this guy's riding way late, and there's a bunch of traffic back in here. It was that you sought an additional permit to say, hey, I want more than just a home here, I want to put a track here.
I never sought a permit. There is no listing saying you need a permit to
But when you
do
filed the
private
subdivision
recreation.
plat, did you have any plans that were presented at planning and zoning that time that included a track?
No,
No reason to, you felt like you could do whatever?
I didn't submit where I'm gonna put my pool
Right?
or where I'm gonna put my pond, all which are expectations of our property.
Right.
Just for clarification, I think what you're referring to is a special use permit versus just a regular
Right.
plat.
Right.
So,
Correct.
So there's no special use permit. So in your mind, there's no difference between water splashing out of a pool and the dust splashing off of a track. It's all the same.
Correct. When I was in high school and lived literally 300 feet north of my current property and had over 100 friends over and had a swimming party, we never
Same
had.
noise level as a bunch of people.
No, this was a lot, no, that was a lot noisier back then. When you have 100 high school kids outside playing in a pond and then doing all of that nature, I think that turns into a ruckus faster than 3 kids on a motorbike that are all under the age of 10.
okay. All right, we'll move on for the sake of time. Thank you. Michelle, did you want to bring up the points you had in your report?
Yes, I would. Some of it I will, at the planning commission hearing, they had approved, and then they had included in their approval a way to mitigate the sound, and following the OSHA guidelines of what can be transferred from the property. And then they also included in their motion another comment about in the motion to be as good of a neighbor as possible. I would like to also clarify that they did submit their preliminary plat. That is where that I have not seen anything as far as a final plat review. It's a little premature for that. So they are not able to build a dwelling at this time until they have a final plat that has been approved. And that is one thing with in the RA2 zone, it is, it is currently undeveloped. And so in the RA2 zones, the primary use should be a residential use. And then everything else is customarily and secondary to that residential use. There is currently not your primary use on this property at this time. And so that it shouldn't have any secondary uses going on until that primary use is established. And then I was going to say the RA2 zone does not allow for the motocross tracks. However, in the A1 zoning district, there is the option to apply for a use permit in an A1 zone to allow through a public hearing process to be held to determine if a motocross track is appropriate at that location within A1 zone. A use permit in an A1 zone is not an option for the wide property because it was rezoned to the RA2. I would also like to point out there is a noise ordinance in the state law, and the violation of that is a misdemeanor, and all county rules are an infraction. And then one more thing that Steve had wanted to be included, if approved, there needs to be parameters of the use that must be considered and set to differentiation of this use and outright motocross track, such as limits of who can ride and time frames. And I believe that is the only other things that I needed to add at this time. Do you have any questions for me?
I have one. Who enforces the sound level, where that's a state law? Who enforces
It is,
that?
it is typically enforced by the sheriff's department.
But it is a misdemeanor because it's a violation of state law. Do you know what levels those are?
I do not know the levels. I'm sorry.
But
I
those,
think if I think my understanding is if it becomes a nuisance, then that triggers the need for the law enforcement to go out to deal with that level of the noise ordinance.
Question, Michelle. Are you done? Michelle, I have a quick question. You referred to OSHA earlier, which is a federal statute. Who enforces that?
Can I jump in on that? Because if you look at the record of the minutes, OSHA is a workplace safety. And that's why I asked you who enforces, because it wouldn't be OSHA. They enforce workplace safety. It's a state law, so I'm assuming that there would be standards inside the same state law that would define when it's a violation.
Fine, if it has nothing to do with, this would only be a workplace if it was a commercial activity and they had employees, so I think it's probably a different reference that you made.
I've got a couple questions.
Okay.
So I guess first I want to clarify, Michelle, you said that no secondary use can be established until the primary use is first. So did I understand that correctly then? Until a home is permitted, then there cannot be any secondary use, and you would consider recreation on the property as a secondary use?
Yes, you need to have a primary use first, so the home should be there. I wouldn't say having the motocross track, having that in place like that, because it goes back to that scale again. So having that there and being used prior to the establishment of the main use is not something that should occur.
What about farming?
Let me follow up on that a little bit. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding that. If somebody has a piece of property, even though they don't build a home, they should be able to go out and use their property
Hold your comments, please.
to ride a motorbike. Would you agree with that? Or to ride a horse on it or anything else?
It is the creation of like hauling in the dirt and creating a track prior to the main use is one point that Mr. Sir had wanted to make sure that you understood in the hearing.
Okay. And then secondly, to go back to our administrator, Steve Sear, it was my understanding that he denied this use to begin with, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm a little fuzzy on this. So it was denied because Mr. Colter was actually one that appealed it primarily to the planning and zoning, correct, in the first place, to have the planning.
That's correct. That is correct.
So let me finish.
I'm sorry.
No, so let me finish. I was told that, are you hearing me okay?
No, it is cutting in and out. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can. There's multiple people logging on. This is one of the issues with this technology, but let me try again. So, okay. So it's my understanding then that Mr. Sear denied this, but I was told that there was never an application made for this, for permitted use. Mr. Yde said that. So why did I'm trying to understand why Mr. Sear denied it in the first place, if there was never an application made.
I see Steve's on there now. Maybe Steve could respond to that.
Sorry about getting in late.
So Steve, you understand my question? I'm trying to understand why it went to planning and zoning in the first place.
Okay. The reason it went to planning and zoning was Mr. White had challenged my determination that it was not an allowed use. So he filed an appeal of an administrative decision saying that the use was.
Okay, so we were told in testimony today that there was never an application made for this use.
That's correct. We had received complaints. We did an investigation and made a determination that there was a motocross track that was being developed on the property, and that use was not an apparent use that was allowed on a unplatted property in an agricultural zone.
Okay, thank you. That's what I
And
assumed.
we sent notification that it was not an approved use, and Mr. White then appealed that the notification of not being allowed use. So the initial hearing before the planning board was an appeal of him against the administrative decision.
Okay, that's what I assumed, and I just wanted to make sure it was on the record today. My last question is your knowledge of other similar cross tracks that are being utilized in RA2 zones.
There are few that have been brought to our attention that have been where people are driving courses. We do have another large one that's on the east side of the county that's in an RA zone. We've also sent them notification of not being an allowed use because of the way it's configured and where it's developed. And just to reaffirm the notice or the conditions that they have placed in the RA zone when they call secondary uses in association with the primary use of the property is a valid point that they're not allowed to develop other uses on the property that are not directly allowed within that zone, only if they have the residence established. That has been reviewed, and we have different cases that have been addressed on that issue. And we also have validation with legal counsel on that same parameter.
Sorry to take so much time. Can I follow up with one more question, Mr. Chairman? So I am aware of one, I think, there may be more, piece of property where an owner has placed half a dozen tracks or jumps in a track where they've ridden motorcycles on it. I'm trying to understand the difference. So if you receive complaints on that scenario on a 2-acre parcel of land from neighbors, would that too then be denied and have to stop? I'm trying to understand how latitude there is in riding a motorcycle on your own property.
Again, we don't deny the right that the people have to do a casual use of riding their motorcycles on the property. We've never challenged those. We typically get involved if they are becoming a nuisance and we receive complaints from adjacent property owners to then investigate, see if there is a violation, if it is causing problems for the neighborhood. And then if it is determined, we attempt to eliminate the issue with the property owner if they can downsize it or stop the use or do something to make it more compatible. As a policy is we're not constantly going out there and looking for everybody who has any violation of the ordinance. We typically respond to those that are causing problems for the neighbors.
Promise, Mr. Chairman, this is the last one. So just to clarify that even further, so it was submitted by one of the letters, section 18-6409 of Idaho Code, talks about disturbing the peace. If it was determined that that was actually in effect taking place, would that then cause you more reason to deny a use on a property? Is that part of what your decision making is?
If it is a disturbance and it's in excess of county noise standards, all local entities are supposed to be supportive and enforce the state rules, regulations that are adopted by the legislature and signed into law. So it's generally a city or a county's due diligence responsibility under the delegation of state authority to enforce state rules and relations. Not only is it a responsibility of the public entity, with that state law in effect, even individuals can file action suits against us for violating the noise standards, and they can go after them on a civil basis even.
All right, thank you.
I just have one question, if I could, Mr. Chair. It's a scenario question, Steve. If a property owner in question believe that it's private recreation to light off fireworks that go straight up and straight down when they come down on his property, but they go off, make noise. Or if someone owned a helicopter and wanted to fly it every night up and down, as long as they stayed on their own property with a helicopter until they got up in the air and then they went wherever they wanted and then they come down. Would that be defined as private recreation in your mind in regard to this ordinance? Or how would you address the private recreation side of the argument that the property owner is making today?
The fireworks have specific standards that are listed in state law that regulates the use of fireworks. Anything that goes off the ground is not legally allowed unless it's under a licensed venue with licensed, certified, qualified people who are doing display. To do that, they would have to apply and get a fireworks display permit. If they do it individually without that, are they in violation of the law? Yes. Are they recreating? Yes. So you could say not all recreation use that people do are in compliance with the law if they are violating some other law in so doing. And can tickets be cited and written to people who shoot off fireworks that are illegal? Yes, they can.
That's probably not necessary.
Yeah, that is. They're similar but different.
Yep.
See, do we have any public that wishes to testify that has not testified, and limited to the statutes or ordinances, please? Because we're running short on time. This isn't about whether you support or not. You know, unfortunately, zoning decisions aren't popularity contests. So yes, step forward if you give your name and address.
I'm Eric Yde. I live at 460 South Cara Vista in Idaho Falls. I'm Colter's dad. We bought that property in 1992 when Colter was just born. We took motorcycles out there at that time and rode in the sagebrush. We soon later built a home. We continued to ride motorcycles. What developed was a track. Commissioners, a track developed over time. The only thing different with Colter and Maurice's property is they developed it in a heartbeat. They cleared some ground, they brought in 4 loads of dirt, and they made a track, and they made it so their kids could enjoy it and they could recreate. The problem here seems to be views of the Gammons, not how they see it, but what they visually see looking out from their property. They don't see that sagebrush ground anymore that they've seen for 25 or 30 years. They see a motocross track. Change happens. I can drive out on other roads where people have planted large trees and it is now blocking views of other people. Things happen. The trees grow over time. Developments happen over time. Views change. The views of what you see, not what you're thinking in your mind, but what you visually can see. That's what's really happened here. And it continues, it's going to continue to change. When Colter and Marisa build their home's going to be on the ridgeline, on the hill. It is going to be right in the Gammon's view. They're not gonna be able to see part of Taylor Mountain and part of the windmills and across town like they see now, because there's gonna be a home there. What they see looking down on this hole where they put this motocross track, or I call it it's a bike track. I really don't call it a motocross. Yeah, it has some jumps and humps and bumps, but it's made for little bikes. It's not made for big bikes. Kathy Gammon talked about agriculture use. Yes, it is there. We had a horse. I got fenced still. I had part of a barn there. We followed the rules of the covenants of the resident of the estate that we live in that says barns would be 50 feet away from the property line. If you had agricultural stuff, 30 feet if it was for other stuff. That was specific restricted covenants of Karrtchner and Caribou estates. The Gammons have a barn and a round pen used for horses, sheep, goats, whatever they had, that are within 0.0 feet of the property line. It violates those restrictive covenants, but yet that's fine with it. Agriculture, I've been fine since I've been there. The round pen showed up after we lived there. It was fine. But I think they need to look at what they've done in violation as well, outside of that. The other, I understand that, but I'm just, the other part comes to what's specific use, and like my son Colter went through that. Zip line, swimming pool, is a zip line permittable? If you got 100, 200 foot zip line, is that a permitted use? Do you need a special use permit to have that? And it comes back to views. The primary use of this property, when we bought it from Patty Sherlock back in 2015, was to have a residence. We looked at that house or that property. We lived alongside of it since 1994. When we bought that 11.6 acres, it was to build a home. We knew that Colter always wanted to have a home on Lava Rock Hill, as he called it. And he still does. And now they're gonna have that opportunity. It's the zoning and all that's going through. So Wide Open Spaces is the name of the development, and they want to have one home on there. And yeah, there's a track in there that's part of a residential use. It's their use, it's not commercial. It's for their use. And yeah, my other grandkids will probably ride on it. They may have a friend now and then that comes over on it. But it's recreational use it's not commercial use. It's casual use. And again, I think the biggest thing is what they see, and it's hard to accept change sometimes if you build a house or plant trees and what your neighbor's view is, but
So that we don't get sidetracked, because the view is not an issue here, so.
I think that's where it all started. When Kathy Gammon came crying at my doorsteps.
I do have one question for you though. You say Karrtchner has covenants?
What's that?
Karrtchner has covenants?
Yes.
Do any of those restrict this type of use covenants?
No.
Yes.
Uh,
8 is a noise doesn't live in Karrtchner estate.
Well, I have them right here, Kathy.
Number 8.
Yeah, those 2 pages, submit those to us. We're not what they are.
Yeah, I have what Kathy's given us and went through it.
Mr. Christensen,
I can submit a copy.
this is Steve. We are not allowed to utilize restrictive covenants. We can't discuss them or introduce them into anything that the county enforces rules by state law.
But my only point on that, we don't need to have them is if they're restricting covenants, there's other civil remedies. So, okay.
And Colter and Reese's property is outside those estates. It wasn't part of that plotted property. Thank you.
All right. Else wish to testify briefly? Yes, sir.
My name's Mike Bolander. I live at 5103 Rock Hill Circle in Idaho Falls. I previously owned the property. I owned a house that was out there from 2000 until I got divorced. I raised kids out there. I still own the property that's adjacent just south of the wide property. If you remember the maps, there's no circle on that property. I am not opposed to this, and I just have a few comments. This is reported as a public motocross track. It's not. It's a private track. There won't be public people coming to this, only family members of the Yde family. And the time when you hear about 60 people out on this place, There was one incident last year where they had a family reunion at Karrtchner, the father's place, where they had all of the family members there. And kids took turns riding on the property. But the normal use of this, 99% of the time, is private use of Colter Yde's children, okay? We're not talking about a public motocross track. We're talking about, I'm not sure even how many kids he has, 1 or 2. So the majority of the time, you're talking about his children using this as a private track. Okay? Just to clarify that.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once or twice a year, they have a family reunion and there will be additional people, but there won't be 60 people riding on this. It's a private
Okay,
track.
We're starting to sway back into the.
Okay, a couple other things that they've talked about the noise and the noise. I lived out there, and Noise Park, which is it's Noise Park. That's what it's called. It's a couple miles down the road. You hear the people racing their vehicles till midnight on Saturday nights. And I mean, you can hear them like they're next door to you. These are alcohol-fueled, super modified cars. And they also have a motocross track out there that can be used at any time. And you can hear those vehicles out there on that. So they're on the west side of the property that is in question, and he's on the east side of the property. Noise travels all directions. That Noise Park's been there for a long time.
Because you can see we've got a lot of people waiting also.
Okay, I'm gonna be short and sweet here. I've been at every one of these meetings and I've sat here and listened, so I'm gonna say what I wanna say.
Also, the noise thing is about the noise that leaves their property. That's why I don't want to get too far astray.
Well, I just want you to realize that if they built their houses out in that area, Noise Park was there when they built their houses, okay?
Okay.
So I have a hard time with anybody complaining about the noise. So I want to make it a point that this is a private use. It's not a public use. I want to make the point that noise was always there before, and excessive noise. Noise Park's noisy. If you've never been there, go listen. And thirdly, it's a private thing. There's people out there that ride horses, that ride snowmobiles during the wintertime out on the farm ground. There's people that shoot high-powered rifles out there. So are we going to call that a rifle range now? Is this going to be, do they need a permit to shoot their high-powered rifles? There's people that shoot archery. Are you going to call that an archery range and have that to where they have to use a special permit to use? This is somebody using their own property for private use. And it's a slippery slope if you start telling people what they can and can't do, because that's, you need to consider this. So we have shooting ranges, we have archery ranges.
Again, we're getting far away from that.
Again, I'm going to say my comment.
Well,
So
time has expired because we're getting too far apart. So thank you.
Okay,
and we'll move on.
And lastly, I'm going to say, as far as the farm ground, there is farm to the east, but directly to the west, there's farm ground where they farm that also. Cara Vista, if you look on a map, is a little teeny piece out there that's zoned RA2. The rest of it around it out there is zoned A1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And stick to the points. We're drifting.
My name is Anna Yde. I live at 460 South Cara Vista Drive. And my point is just based on what Steve said. Steve said that complaints, that when the noise gets and somebody makes complaints, is that kind of creates an issue. Did I understand that correctly when he was talking? So my point is they brought in people who had signed the petition. But if you look at that map, there are way more people who didn't sign the petition. And so that's my point. If you're talking about complaints and you're going to compare it to how many people, what is the percentage of people who actually complained compared to who is living there, there's way more people who did not complain. And I bring that up just because Steve brought up that having a complaint does make it something they check into. So is my point.
And I'll point out that that's an administrator's decision, which
Yeah.
has been appealed, and that's
Okay.
what we're considering, so. Quick closing, if you have anything you want to add.
Real quick,
Brief.
first of all, thank you for ignoring the White's opinions that they seem to pretty impressed to impose upon us.
Let's not.
This is not
Okay,
an issue about public or private.
don't
track.
make it personal, or we're gonna shut it off.
Okay, it's not an issue about public or private usage. It's an issue about land use as defined and required by the zoning ordinances. My last point, not every private activity, what we have heard is called gray areas, can be found in the permitted list. We know that. That's true. What you need to remember is that section 154C requires non-listed uses be, quote, similar and compatible with permitted uses, and be, quote, in harmony with the characteristics of the zone. Similar, compatible, and in harmony. How is a motocross track? The one that we're talking about, developed multiple loops, tracks, jumps. How is a motocross track, not a trail? How is it compatible or in harmony with the characteristics of our neighborhood? About the petition, the people that were not circled, we didn't ask them, except for 3 that were neutral on the issue.
We're starting to drift again.
Okay.
That's completely irrelevant to what we're doing, so. Any final questions? Oh, yes.
Can I speak? I'd just like to quickly say the main feature of Chapter 9 RA2 zone is the single family dwelling. Much of the language in RA2 zone is dedicated to describing the front yards, the backyards, the barns, the corrals, the uses. All of this is written as a protection for those who dwell in that zone. I like the word dwell. It connotes safety, security, peace, where one can be settled. Chapter 1, Section 1 of the zoning ordinance is the very first purpose or reason the zoning ordinance exists is to promote peace and the general welfare of the residents of Bonneville County. Commissioners, I have read and reread these ordinances many, many times. As I have done that, a central theme or ideal of the ordinances kind of began to coalesce in my mind. And that ideal is beneficence. That's a big, long word for a very important meaning. Beneficence means for the good of all. That is why the zoning ordinances exist, to promote peace and for the good of all. It's erroneous to characterize this decision as over property rights or recreational use, as Mr. White has stated. This issue today is all about land use and the proper application of the zoning ordinances of Bonneville County. When the ordinances are consulted and specifically looked at and examined carefully, it's easy to see. One can determine that a dedicated, developed motocross track is not a proper use of RA2 zoned land. Therefore, we reject the Board of Adjustment's decision and support the initial decision of the zoning administrator to prevent the use of the motocross track on RA2 land. Please look at the ordinances carefully, commissioners, as you make your decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any final questions?
The only question I have, Mr. Chair, is if there's anything else for the record that Steve Sue would like to put on, or any member of his staff, is there anything else that we missed?
This is Austin Black, Assistant Planner. Something's been brought up several times about dwelling on the property before you have that accessory use, essentially. I just wanted to note for the record that's talked about in section 19012 of the zoning ordinance under RA2. So I just wanted to add that to the record.
Okay, thank you. With With that, we'll close this hearing to public testimony. We'll take the issue of advisement. Probably this, because we have a little bit of stuff to go through thoroughly, might take 3 or 4 weeks, I'm guessing. Just want to urge the public, because it appears that some of you know some of the commissioners on a personal basis. Please do not contact them because these are quasi-judicial. You can't have any conversations. It's out of fairness issue, just like you would with a judge. You can't go lobby a judge to try to get an outcome without having the other party here to rebut. And that's why it's set up the way it is. So we appreciate your preparation, your work. We take this very seriously. So with that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you. Road and Iona Road, Idaho Falls, Bonneville County. There's a lengthy legal description along with the instructions on how to participate. Because of the COVID, I notice we have several people still on. I'm assuming they're here for this hearing. So to begin with, we'll have the applicant, which is Karrtchner Homes, or their representative, go ahead and present their proposal.
Okay, my name is Troy Karrtchner. I'm with Karrtchner Homes. I would, if we can we share some slides with you of the property and project?
You bet. You know how to share, or is that something we have? There we go.
Brett Stauffer is going to do that. Okay, great. So, Brett, maybe just the boundary of everything there that's in green and red and pink is what we are asking to be rezoned from the ag zone, the residential single family lots to the R1, and where we have the townhomes, that would be rezoned to the R3. And so what we have done here is, I think the plan has always been for, what drive is this along the railroad? What is that road, Brett?
Larson.
Larson. The plan has always been for Larson to continue through out to Hit Road. I know that's been a discussion over time as to whether how direct it should come. So we've tried to round it there so that it comes in square to Hit and also maybe slows some traffic as it comes out there so that it's not, it doesn't become a racetrack. And then that road then will connect all the way through Summit Park over to, is that Ammon Road, right? On clear through Summit Park?
Right, over to Ammon Road. That's correct, Troy.
Yeah. And then we have another access to up to Iona Road. We have 2 accesses there. The main road that we've always had right there. And then we've added another access that lines up with the road to the north of it so that there's an access there as well, and try to create a variety of ins and outs, but keep as far away from the roundabout as we can. The other thing that we've done is we've worked with staff is we've got to widen Hit, and we've got to widen Iona. We've got to create turning lanes. We've got to widen that roundabout so that it's bigger. We know that that's coming. So we planned for that. We planned for the turning lanes and as you come into the roundabout. And so we've taken consideration all the widening and everything that needs to happen there. And we understand that we'll have to work with the traffic study to finalize some of that. We've also worked with the
Corps of Engineers.
To make sure that the irrigation ditches can be piped and changed, and they've been okay with that. We've worked with Falls Water and Iona Bonneville Sewer District to make sure that they have capacity to serve these additional residential single-family homes and townhomes, and they have confirmed that they do have capacity and that it will work. We've looked at this a number of different ways. I know the owners, the sellers originally were thinking maybe some light industrial or commercial along HIT. And we know that there's industrial to the west. We know that we've got some single family and commercial to the north, and of course the railroad tracks and the gravel pits, and likely some other light industrial and commercial further to the south along HIT Road. And so instead of doing commercial or light industrial along HIT, we feel like as a good buffer to the single family homes, we would lay out some townhomes and a nice clubhouse, swimming pool, playground, and as a to kind of buffer so that you go from it's not real dense. I think we're about 8 units per acre there, but you go from that buffer then to a little, more of a townhome with the most all of these townhomes have 2-car garages. They range in size from 1,500 square feet to 1,750 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. The townhomes against the railroad tracks, those will be 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and 3-bedroom, or 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, and 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath with covered parking. And they will be property that we retain as rentals and manage personally. We have a number of other apartment communities in the area. In Snake River Landing, we have the Falls. On First Street in Ammon, we have the residences, and in Rexburg, we have a couple of projects, and Pocatello, we're building a project right now, and in Logan, Utah as well. So we have the capacity to build those and manage them and keep them nice looking for a long time to come. And so that's why we've designed it this way, is kind of buffer from the railroad tracks. And then the single family lots along the railroad tracks, those have, they're very deep, so that we've got a very deep backyard there. And so that's kind of how we laid this out. And we've talked to the community and met with the citizens through a Zoom conference. They seem comfortable. They know that it's going to bring more traffic. Obviously, things like schools and churches and traffic lights and those type of things come as there's more households, and so that's always a concern to people. But then their other concern was Larson, and so we'll show you another design. It's not the preferred way, but it works because they're concerned that Larson may become a thoroughfare, so to speak, for traffic. And
can I move you on from that point? Talking about things that are taken up in the planning process. This is rezoning. You'll have to work with staff and the P&Z commission when you're planning to take care of those concerns.
Okay.
Our purpose of this hearing is to make sure it meets the requirements for the zone that's been applied for, and of course talk to you about any other conditions, which I appreciate you already brought up, by the extra width of the right-of-way and improvements that we've started to require, to make sure you're aware of that. So,
okay.
Steve, do you have any, or staff, do you have anything to add as far as the how this qualifies for the zones?
Michelle Hagan, assistant planner with Planning and zoning, you were given all the copies and the staff report from the planning commission hearing, which had everything. The planning commission had recommended approval with, and then, you know, we have our plating requirement and the right of way that's already been addressed, and they've already been working with Public Works. At the rezoning hearing, they did also submit a master plan, which is very similar to what is on the screen here. We have no additional comments at this time for the rezone. Any other
Yeah.
questions for me?
No, but you did bring up a point I forgot to make, the planning commission's minutes and staff reports part of the record, so we'll do that without objection. So, anything else? Is there any members of the public on here? I only see one. Can't see it, Brett Stockton.
I was helping Troy share the slides.
Oh, that's what I need to hear, because I don't know how to do that stuff either. So, okay, anything else you wish to add?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question if I could.
Okay.
This is for any of the staff, either Austin, Michelle, or Steve. I noticed in the public hearing publication that we're going from RA1 to R1 and R3. The proposed area for R3 is described, but there's no R1 described. Is there that much difference on RA1 versus R1 in terms of density? Could you just refresh me really quick on that?
The RA1 is a 15,000 square foot lot, and the R1 is an 8,000 square foot lot. And, you know, the RA1, it will allow for animals and some other uses, as opposed to the R1 zoning, which does not allow for those. It has so it's not, it is a difference in the increase in the density. It was,
I guess if I could just interject, Michelle, we published that we're going to R1, but I see the proposed area is all R3. And yet there's R1 that was described, from Karrtchner Homes in the map.
actually, I don't know what happened to your copy, because there's a legal description for a specific area going to R3, and then there's a area for going to the R1. Part of the area that's going to the R1 is already R1. That's in the description. It's only about 3.9 acres that's being increased from, or that's going from RA1 to R1. So you're looking at a total of 30.4 acres for R1, and then approximately 25.6 acres that's going to R3. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, I just didn't get a legal description like I did for R3. I just didn't get a legal description on the proposed area for R1. That's all.
I have one.
To clarify, the R3 density is about 8 doors per 18,000 square feet.
I had just one question the chairman can probably help me with. So the right of way for the roundabout, since we know that is going to increase, and they did speak of it, that'll be more thoroughly addressed in the planning.
The plat, the plat will have a requirement to dedicate that.
Right.
And it looks like they've talked to staff, which was informative to us, but that's what they'll do to extend the right of way, and which is good, to put acceleration and deceleration around the right of way. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no public, we'll close this hearing to public testimony. We'll take the issue under advisement. This is one I would anticipate we could have some proposed findings to present to us in 2 weeks or less. That's a question for staff.
I believe we can work on that.
Okay, approximately 2 weeks. So thank you. And you're much more controlled than you witnessed at the last hearing, and we appreciate that. Okay, we've got one more. We'll begin this by reading the notice of public hearing. Notice is given that the following hearing will be held at the Bonneville County Courthouse, 605 North Capitol Avenue, Idaho Falls, Idaho, September 17th, 2020 at 3:30 p.m. by the Bonneville County Commissioners for the purposes of a public hearing in relation to the application of HK Contractors, Inc. for a zoning map amendment from agriculture A1 to industrial and manufacturing INM1 zone. General location of this was east of US 20 and the Eastern Idaho Railroad, north of 49th North Felford Road, and east of 1523 East North Bonneville County. There were legal descriptions and on how to participate with this. Without objection, we'll make the Planning Commission and the staff reports part of the record. And probably we'll do this one. I kind of got a little out of order after that very first one, but have planning and zoning go through and summarize the Planning Commission recommendation, and then we'll open it up to a representative of HDK.
All right, Michelle Hagan, Assistant Planner with Planning and Zoning Department. This is the application by HK. Property is located on the north side of and east of 49th North and east of Highway 20 and the railroad. You had, it was the same, this property was recently subject to a land use map amendment to an industrial designation. The subject parcel or the area that is subject to the rezone is 55.263 acres. It is currently zoned agriculture. They're requesting to go to industrial and manufacturing 1. It is the location of an existing gravel pit. The property is adjacent to, there is our land use map on the screen. And then Austin, can you switch? Thank you. The property is adjacent to, you see the INM1 and A1 land, and then there's also some C2. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on August 26th, and they recommend approval of the rezone request. The conditions were landscaping along arterial buffers, and platting will be required, and they have already begun the process. They've already been to the Planning Commission with a preliminary plat. Are there any questions for me at this time?
We have a representative from H&K on.
Yeah, this is Dak Maxfield representing HK. I've also got Void Stewart with me, who's able to answer more of the operational questions, but we're happy to be here and able to answer any questions you might have of us.
I just have one quick question, if you don't mind. The map that was posted on Zoom, did you see the map of the proposed rezone?
I did, yes.
This looks like a lot of activity already. There's been a lot of movement of there. That's just in preparation to the. Could you?
That's the gravel pit that's been extending.
Okay.
This, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this allows kind of a different use in the part of the gravel pit that's being operated on. For example, repositioning of the hot mix plant. Is that correct?
This is to allow for the batch plant because there's the existing hot mix plant, which is already located in the land that is already industrial. And then based on DEQ requirements for distancing to have a batch plant and a hot mix plant, they have to have a certain distance apart. And so that is located, the batch plant was located in a section that is zoned, that was zoned ag.
Okay, which was an allowed use at the time, so it's just, it just looks like a lot of, I don't know the date of this picture on this map, but it looks like a lot of work's already been done in there, which is probably an allowed use at the time. This is just for more.
Steve's here, just to clarify. H&K had applied for a ag use permit within a use permit for a gravel pit in an agricultural zone on all the property from what you see on the photo, clear to the road to the east, which is another quarter mile, 3/8 of a mile. So they have an approved permit for running the gravel pit on that property. That's the reason that you see activity in there, is they're just pursuing the existing permit that they had for the gravel extraction. And that's totally in compliance with their use hearing for the gravel pit. The gravel pit only allows for use of crushers. It doesn't allow for batch plants or hot plants within that use, within the gravel zone of the gravel extraction zone for the gravel pit. So the purpose of this is to rezone to the expand and put other uses in that property. And so it coincides with the same variance that they had, or same allowed use they had when they applied for the gravel pit. In that gravel pit, they were also required to put buffering around the perimeter of the gravel pit, which would coincide with the basic requirements that we were looking at that was recommended by the planning board for buffering for the rezone.
Perfect, thanks, Steve. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, are there any members of the public that wish to testify? Hearing none, is there anything staff would like to add for the record? Hearing none, we'll close this hearing to public comment. We'll take the issue under advisement. Try to have a decision ready within a couple of weeks. Correct, staff? Austin,
No problem.
A week. The plan is within a week, so.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle and Austin and Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.